To koncert będzie zaraz po wykładzie, prawda? Jego
No trudno mi jednoznacznie powiedzieć, czy będzie ten wykład dokładnie do 18, bo my tak, te wykłady są w granicach godzina do półtorej godziny no i raczej staram się, żeby się skończyły przed koncertem. Także one są wstępem do koncertu. Dzisiaj ten ostatni koncert jest ewidentnie wstępem, dlatego że on jest autorem jednego z utworów, który będzie grane o 18.
Tak,
także ja dlatego ja go zapytałem, czy... Tak. Okay. So I don't need to ask him to switch between Polish and English. I can only ask him to switch between Spanish and
Spanish, a bit of Dutch.
Oh, Dutch, yes.
Everybody knows a few words in Spanish.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Just
those old Latin American serials, you know, all over the world.
We are too many people speaking Spanish at the same time.
Isaura?
Isaura, Laura, you know.
Dobrze.
I know Spanish, but very little.
Yep.
I was in Mexico.
Ah, really? When was that? Long time ago?
What about your Mexican?
I was traveling along from Yucatan to Mexico
cool.
City, visiting as
We
well
get it.
archaeological
Right.
journey.
Yeah, all that part of Mexico is full of archaeology and
Yes, I know.
many things. Yeah. Ah, cool. That's working. So,
¿Dónde
Eres.
¿de dónde?
¿Dónde es de México?
¿De qué parte de
¿Cuándo,
México?
¿Cuándo ciudad?
De Ciudad de México, del
México.
DF, sí. Nací ahí, pero vivo en Holanda desde hace 23 años. So I was born there, but I live in the Netherlands already for 23 years or something. I left I try to come back as much as possible. Escape the weather.
Netherlands, where are you based? In Amsterdam?
In The Hague. I went there to study sonology and composition, and I stayed there until now. I'm teaching in the conservatory in The Hague. Yeah.
You study in the conservatory?
Yeah.
Okay.
Somehow I stayed, stick around for so long.
Your turn.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
We got it.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation, Marek, for the great
My
festival, for you to be here today. So I'm just gonna talk about my work in general, some of the pieces I do, the way I work with instruments, the way I work with electronic music. Maybe you can also at any moment stop me if you want to say something, questions, remarks, or anything. Let's see also, because we have this concert, so this is kind of
we have 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Sadly. So
1 hour 10 minutes, that would be
right.
the maximum.
Right. So my name is Hugo Murguia. I come from Mexico City. I live in the Netherlands, as I said, already 23 years. I came to the Netherlands originally to study composition, music composition. But once I was there, I realized there was also this department of sonology, the Institute of Sonology. So I was combining both. Back in those days, it was possible to study two for the same price, for the price of one. So I was doing it. And it was actually very fruitful for me, I found. So I'm going to talk about, in general, about those things today. A little bit about how I came to study music. I was always playing electric guitar, so I keep saying that because I still find fascinating the possibility of play with electricity and create sounds with electricity, and being able to control electricity in one way or another is something that still fascinates me and still find it very playful in my work. So this idea of playing an instrument, I started understanding music by playing an instrument, by connecting with music through an instrument. So I guess that's also relevant and important for every composer, the way that they relate to music in a young age, in an early age. And very quickly discovered also through this interaction with instruments, the fascination that I had for complex sounds, otherwise called noise. I don't like very much to call noise to everything. Now I know it's kind of like usual to do it like that, but not necessarily. What I mean is not necessarily to pitch structures and not to harmonies, but like sounds that might be considered noise for some. So as I said, I was studying. First, I started studying guitar. Then I started doing composition. When I came to the Netherlands, I found out that there was this department of sonology, and that helped me to kind of formalize my practice that I was doing with electric guitar and with instruments. Something that it was also relevant in the way that I compose, and is still relevant today, is that I only compose a piece if I have the instrument with me. I don't invent a score for something that I probably will hear in the future. I'm terrible for that, and I prefer to have the instrument in my hands and find ways to relate to this instrument, either by inventing my own techniques or by doing something to the physical object. So I wrote about this stuff throughout my academic formation. The bachelor's, I wrote a paper called Sonic Gestalts, that it was more about the multimodal way of relating to electronic music. And then the master's and the PhD that I did in Brunel University, it was more focused already on the way of working with traditional instruments and engaging with traditional instruments in a more personal level, I suppose. So maybe just to give a context, I will play a short demo of some of the stuff I do. That's more or less a collection of works that I've done in the past maybe 10 or 15 years. that well, maybe gives an overview of my work with traditional instruments or with objects used as instruments. So maybe just to go through the different, some of the different techniques that I use to explain some of the pieces that you just saw. I will talk about 3 different categories. We'll go probably very fast in some of them that I find less important in the work that I do right now, but maybe helps to give a little bit of a genesis of how my story has gone with working with traditional instruments and how I got to these ideas. So the first one is mechanical systems, so anything that does not necessarily involve electricity, so just the relationship with the instrument. Electronic music, how I understand electronic music and how I approach electronic music, and the idea of electric music, or also the body as a musical instrument. So very frequently when I am talking to students or talking to people in general that are familiar to contemporary music, they sometimes refer to these techniques as extended techniques, right? Like anything that is outside of the canonic way or the way that an instrument is supposed to sound like or supposed to operate is extended. And that I prefer not to call this technique or the way I work relate to techniques not as extended, but as something that might be also inherent to the way of playing an instrument, right? It's just not discovered yet, or is not yet discovered by the composer or by the people creating with this instrument. So otherwise, pretending that something is extended is saying that we have the canonic way, the real way of writing for these instruments, and anything else is extension. So I prefer to relate to.
In a way, it is comparing to the builder. Yeah?
Exactly,
the
comparing
original concept.
to the original concept. But I feel that that's a little bit understanding or approaching these techniques like that from the beginning might limit a little bit what we can do with that.
That's true.
I feel. So I prefer when I try to approach an instrument, I prefer to think that this instrument has no history or not repertoire. Which is kind of impossible, because on the back of my head I know that the piano should be played with the keys, no? But if I try
when we treat it as an object, the wind flow or airflow or something, then it's a little bit like a concept of physical modeling, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like a objectified approach of an instrument, or instrumental approach to an object at the same time. I would say. Yeah. So it's for me, at least in my head, the way it relates to instruments, I prefer to really understand them or approach them as something that is completely new to me, and that helps me a little bit to get out of prejudgments a little bit of what those instruments do. The very first piece that I wrote, maybe, or one of the first ones that I wrote in this with this approach, is this piece that I wrote for triangle. I wrote it before knowing that Albin Lucier wrote a piece for triangle, so that was lucky for me, because I did not have this preconception of what a triangle could do. And I wrote this piece not because I think that triangle was such a fascinating instrument, but because of something that I said before, that I like to engage with the instrument in a personal level. So I have this friend that asked me to write a piece for his final exam when I was studying music, and he wanted a multi-percussion piece with all these instruments, and to bring all these instruments to my place or get time in the studio to be able to compose with them was impossible. So the only thing that I could take home was a triangle, because a drum was also like very loud for my neighbor. So I just took a triangle, asked my friend to give me as many mallets as possible, and composed this piece that is about 13 minutes for triangle solo amplified. So the first part is playing on the floor, just damping the triangle with the foot, and the second part is holding it with the hand. So it ended up being such a score with proportional notation. The lowest line is for the foot, and the other two are for the two hands. And when he stands up, or the musician stands up, then you have the fingering and the different sides that you can play the triangle, or you can play, and the different positions also, like he has to hold it and flip it. Hi. So super short examples. I will probably, some of them I will skip just because of the time, but just to give an idea of what this piece sounds like. The vibration of the triangle makes this little bar bounce on top of it. It's rather difficult to keep it in place because it's shaking with the triangle. So maybe it gives an idea of like what I mean when approaching an instrument or an object, or an instrument as an object, no? And trying to find different ways of engaging with it. So many times another concept that comes to mind when we talk about object or instrumental object music or object instrumental or sound oriented composition is the preparation of these instruments, right? Like we probably are all familiar with the pieces by John Cage for the prepared piano. So I try to make a distinction here. A passive preparation, a preparation is normally passive. It's something that we can think about as something that is done prior to the performance, or is fixed, right? Most of the time. And then there's something that I call physical sound processing, where it's actually very similar, but it's active. So you are constantly changing, sort of like injecting energy to the instrument or to the system, and it's dynamic and changing at the same time as it's sounding, right? So that's kind of the distinction I do between these two ways of working with when you talk about objects intervening instruments in this case, basically. So an example of this beyond the pieces of John Cage that we probably know, just to exemplify with my own work, is this piece that I wrote in 2011 for prepared vibraphone, and my idea was to sort of create, talking about extensions, to create an instrumental extension based on aluminum paper on top of the keys, which is the same material as the keys, and also using cymbals, metal cymbals, to get sort of articulate the vibration of each key, since the key is vibrates quite a lot. So my idea with this piece was to focus on timbre and not so much in the different pitches that I will use. And that's always the question that I have, and the problem that I have is like whenever I start writing a new piece, is like which pitches shall I use, which notes shall I use. I rather just don't care about the notes and start thinking about other parts of the other musical elements, and in this case it was timbre. So I created different techniques for articulating these different sounds, but the pitches and the rhythms are quite simple, right? Almost repetitive. My idea was to sort of make some parameters very simple while making all other parameters more complex. So in this case, rhythm and pitch, which is normally or usually what is more complex, is very simple, and timbre is the most complex parameter. So that's why you see almost every note has a different sort of technique. and the rhythm is just repetitive, and the pitches are only 3 pitches under octaves. A little bit of that piece. Because there are very few notes, also when there is a mistake, you immediately hear it, because it stays also because of the resonance of the instrument. Just as an example, no? An example of what I called physical sound processing will be a preparation that is changing in real time. In this case, this piece for ensemble that I wrote in 2011, where most of the string instruments are connected with nylon strings, and these nylon strings are pulled up and down to change the pitch of the string that they are attached to. So you have 3 different levels: high tension, medium tension, and low tension. And this nylon string is connected to a stick that is turning. So also the friction of this stick is what determines the different rhythms and the different sounds that produces. That's also equivalent in the flute. The flute has the same kind of technique. I don't know if you know these cicadas toys from Taiwan or from Asia, that they do this. It's the same kind of technique, but connected to the instrument. And this is part of the score. So they have to articulate those rhythms with the friction of the stick, which becomes quite difficult and almost impossible. And that's kind of the idea, that this kind of irregularity created by the impossibility of playing the rhythms perfectly is part of the piece. Of course, I don't tell the ensemble beforehand that it's impossible to play the piece, so I try them to try. I like them to try as much as possible, but it's kind of planned within the system of performance. So that's just an excerpt of that piece. Maybe moving forward to the idea of working with objects. So far it was the work with instruments, right? But what happens if we invert the idea and then we work with objects as musical instruments? It is of course very different, because in order to get the same object with the same properties all the time is almost impossible. You have to go to these shops, and sometimes they have different kinds of, for example, in this vase I could only find in one shop that doesn't exist anymore. So I have to be adjusting to what I find in different places. But I like the idea of finding also some sounds that you would not find with traditional instruments, I suppose. This piece was a piece commissioned to write a piece for saxophone, what was trumpet, clarinet and flute. And I do have the instruments, but after a while trying to find different sounds was impossible. So I thought, you know, this idea of cutting a straw and becomes a double reed instrument on the center. So I said, okay, I like that sound. I like it, sounds a bit like a sawtooth wave. But now the problem remains, what kind of pitches shall I use? Shall I make holes in it and play it as a flute? Shall I make different lengths? and combine them, I couldn't make a decision, so I said, okay, I'm gonna make all the straws as long as possible without still having a possibility of controlling the pitch, and all of the 3 performers have to be in tune. And again, it's almost impossible to get this sound, so you get all these different kind of oscillations that become sort of part of the piece. So it's all the time A flat, and because no one is really a professional straw player, it's almost impossible to keep it in tune. So this is a bit the idea. There's a moment at the end of the piece where I have to actually cut it. It becomes always a bit like funny. It was not the intention, but at the end it just becomes funny because it becomes like a kind of a comedy.
How was this bass sound that was coming? How was it produced?
It's just the length of the straw. So the straw,
just from the straw, from
yeah,
the length, and it produces this bass.
Yeah, because it's like 1 meter long, so you get this low sound. And the shorter it gets, the higher the pitch.
Yes.
Yeah.
The ending is free, or it is back on something?
There is a microphone in the center. Yeah,
Just a microphone.
just a microphone. Just a microphone. Mhm. Yeah, it's just a dynamic microphone, but it has to be really controlled, because if it goes a little bit out of the range of the microphone, it's gone. So that's why they have tape around the ring of the microphone.
Yes,
So maybe that's in relation to objects and instruments and objects, and something that I did and I keep doing is working with technology. I find that most of the music that is related to traditional instruments, we always have to sooner or later meet this problem of repertoire and history and culture, and I have a lot of problems with that, and for me working with technology was really the possibility of getting free of those problems, kind of a little bit escaping and giving me the possibility to explore instruments in different ways. And when I teach, I teach electronic music in the conservatory in The Hague, and I find with students that the possibility of engaging with technology also opens up a lot of creative horizons for them as well. Usually when you have an instrument, and just usually, the sound of the instrument is processed by the computer, somehow changed or manipulated by the computer. I did a few pieces like that, but I always have the same problems of what processor should I use in order to make a sound that I will feel connected with. So after some time I started to think, what if I do the opposite? What if the sound of the computer is processed by the instrument? And of course, what is the sound of the computer? So I decided to use only the sounds that you will get from early electronic music or from analog equipment, which is just noise, sine waves, and very simple waves. and see how these actually sounds will interact with instruments. So for example, such a piece is this piece that I wrote for flute, where I'm sending white noise into the flute, and the performer has a volume pedal to control the amount of noise going into the flute, a microphone here, and one microphone for each hand. So whenever the performer opens up a key or the mouth, the noise goes out and is sort of filtered by the flute or by the mouth of the performer. So what you hear for 7 minutes is just white noise, pure white noise, but somehow filtered out by the instrument. So the commission was for a flutist, and this is a friend of mine that is a percussionist. It's way easier for him than to play the flute like that than from a flutist, because it's opposite actually. The technique is like you have to open to hear the sound escape, and a flutist would normally just put air and make the sound occur. No, so it's sometimes with these kind of pieces you have to work against the traditional technique of some of the instruments. And the coordination, of course, of foot and other things that you might not have. Another piece with the same kind of approach is a piece that I had to write back then for string instruments. So the challenge for me was how to write a piece for string instruments without using the strings, but taking advantage of other possibilities that these instruments might have, like the size, the material, the way that they are built. So I thought, okay, what if I turn it the other way around and send just a constant pulse and tap the back of the instrument to get a sort of different tone from depending on the size of the instruments and the materials of these instruments. So again, it's just a pulse that goes through a volume pedal, and of course, just to be more consistent, the piano has to be played from underneath with these transducers. I think they become very popular now. I used to when I was giving these talks, I was spending a lot of time trying to explain what transducer is. Now it's like commonplace, most of the people use them. But it's just a speaker without a cone, and it's I put a little cork to prepare it, so just to fix the vibration in the specific spots around the when they scan the instrument, sort of the back of the instrument. Yeah, I don't have a recording of this, but all these pieces are online if you are interested as well. More pieces like that I've done, putting also the same sound through instruments like a trombone or a trumpet, where you really can direct the sound because of the bell. So they have a little a backpack with a battery powered amplifier, and they go walking around with this um, um, instruments. This is a bit how this piece looks like with the trumpet and the trombone using that technique, and the percussion is also having a little loudspeaker here connected with a jack cable. Using motors is something that I do all the time. In this case I put some DC motors with a little piece of tape, and the harpist does not play the harp but the pedal, so each pedal makes a different motor turn, so it's always movement of the pedals and the movement that produces a vibration of a different string connected to a motor. Just to explain the ways I work with technology, so mostly I don't, in the case as in the case of the flute, I try not to use plugins or more complex DSP. I try to do it very simple and try to find the ways that I relate to these sounds more acoustically, I will say, based on the characteristics of the instruments. Then we come to also amplification of physical electronic phenomena. I do a lot of experiments with coils and microphones that will pick up noise or electronic static that is in the instruments. In the case of this piece that I wrote for 3 guitars, I have the guitar has no strings, but it has 4 power supplies. So if you turn a power supply, it gives you this 50 or 60 hertz depending which part of the world you are, and created a sort of keyboard that turns on and off this power supply. So what you hear is different sorts of buzzes depending on which power supply you turn on. And I found working, I had this commission to write a piece for cymbals. I had this cymbal in my place. It was very hot summer night, and I had this thing next to me. I was really trying with different stuff. I couldn't find any sounds that I liked, and suddenly I put this guy next to the racket, the racket next to the cymbal. I got this amazing sound. I'm not completely sure how it works, to be honest, but I know that it has to do with plasma and electronic interference of the circuit of the racket in connection with the cymbal. The cymbal is just connected with the hot into the mixer, and you have to put the mixer all the way up in all the EQ, and then you get such a sound. So if you leave it actually on, the pitch changes, so it goes gradually up, something with the circuit. It only works with this kind of rackets. If I go around it looking for rackets, it's only this kind of brand.
Question: how you connect the
cymbal
symbol to mixing console?
So I just, that every signal has positive and negative. I just connect the positive to the cymbal and go directly, so without the ground, to go directly to the mixer. Yeah. So you get a lot of noise.
On the XLR to the hot pin?
No, to a TS cable, like a jack cable.
Oh, jack?
The tip of the cable
Okay,
into
okay.
the cymbal, and just a cable like that. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So you basically have a signal without ground.
Yeah.
With hum.
With hum, and then whenever you put the racket and turn it on, you get this squeaky sound.
Okay. So you are not using any microphone or
No.
Yeah.
So you can pull it up and no feedback. So
Right. Okay.
also with the previous techniques, many of these techniques actually, because it's not air what is controlling the amplification, you can really go very high in volume if you want.
Yeah.
Maybe moving on to the more ideas with electricity, but particular with the body. I've done many projects with dancers and choreographers. I'm always amazed by the way they use their body, right? Because talking about instruments and objects, we not forget that there's also a performer involved within all these techniques. You know, like always have to be negotiating with the performer how to play or how to do such a thing. So the performer at the end of the day is super important. And also I feel that many of the kind of work I do, many of the pieces that I do are not the same if you don't see them live. So there is a visual element that is so important, and that's where the performer plays a role. After some time, I started to think on how the human body can work as an interface for this sound. So one is by articulating the sound of a particular instrument. In the first case in that piece, I wrote a piece for 5 jacks, and it's just like that, a bare jack cable, and you know the typical sound when you touch the cable, and then one on the tongue as well. So you have this interchange of like 4 fingers and tongue at the same time changing. No, so just to give an example, the body as a machine. So this possibility of working with the body as and working with the possibilities of endurance.
The title is 150 picofarads.
Yeah, that's the you know what that is now, is the capacitance of the human body. That's a little bit what you hear.
Yes.
The idea of the machine as a human, the human body as a machine. So how actually can the human body be able to articulate the same sound or the same pattern for a given or for a longer time, and how these inconsistencies play a role also in the music, and as an electrical conductor. So in this piece that I did for ensemble, I connected the metal of the strings of the instrument to a volume pedal and to an oscillator. So whenever they make contact with the strings, you hear an oscillator and not necessarily the string sounding. This one is an example of that. I won't say much, and I will say it after the piece. How long? It's like 10 minutes, 12 minutes. Not long, but it's pretty hard. I've tried it, and you get really tired, especially if you're not a dancer or a musician. Or, by the way,
they were not dancers. They were just.
There were musicians. Yeah, it's a Ensemble New Music Talent. That's a wrong title. Neo Percussion also in Spain did it, but this is Ensemble New Music Talent. And there's always a question of this. If you get dancers, they can jump very good, but they cannot articulate and read.
They're following the stereotype.
Exactly, well, not done the usual. Yes, exactly. Yes. And musicians cannot really jump as much for so long, so it always becomes a compromise that in a way is part of the piece. I feel.
They start to be tired. Are not so.
So
precise
the,
and
the,
so
the
on.
rhythm
Yeah,
starts like
yes.
breaking apart. Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Which is the idea a little bit, no?
Fine.
Something else, yeah, but with the same concept. I did this piece. I did many pieces with bones. For some reason, this instrument is from Latin America. It's just the jawbone from a horse, and they use it as a percussion instrument. So I made a piece for 15 of them, and then they made this dance production. They asked me to use this piece, and I decided to better write more pieces for these instruments, more based on actually a choreography or a dance performance. So this one is for 2 jawbones and a boxer or musician that knows how to box. So where again the endurance and the physicality of playing an instrument is important in this case.
The name of the piece is Phobia, yes?
The piece is Phobia, and this is the second movement called Trauma.
What is Arrhythmia?
Arrhythmia is the trio. It's the trio that plays it.
Okay,
They are
the
the
name of
musicians.
the ensemble.
Yeah. And they are using the electronics. They are just like triggering with the contact of the bare feet with the metal plate.
I have this instrument, the Latin America. This one is made from jaws of animal.
Of the
jaws?
real instrument, yeah, of the real animal, yeah.
How is it called?
From the horse.
From the horse, yeah.
Końskie kości. Końskie kości.
Aha.
Yeah.
But from what is a bass? We can hear.
On the jaw, you mean?
No,
Bass.
in the background.
It's
The
low
bass,
frequency.
It's the low frequency.
tone,
So
low tone.
you have the kick drum, which she's playing, but also there is a sound of the metal plate in contact with the body
okay.
of the performer,
That's
and
why-
that is going through distortion. So it's like the 60 hertz that you hear, but going through the distortion to make it a bit
Yes,
more.
yes.
So they are not
Crunch.
sampled. There's no sampled sound.
No.
They are real sound processed.
Yeah. It's a real
Okay.
process that goes from the touch of this metal plate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again.
Uh-huh.
Maybe one of the last examples, maybe one of the 2 last ones, is this piece. I wrote this opera without singers. At the end of the day, we had no singers. It's a piece for 4 performers, 4 dancers, and 4 percussionists. And we did it was a collaboration with a visual artist. Again, the jumping. Sort of cotton candy machines. Amplified. It's also the idea of using objects and really focusing on some of the objects that are very simple. And many of these subjects actually came from working with a visual artist. It's a bit longer, the demo, but I will so it gives an idea of maybe just working with the things that I've been saying, no? Working with objects, amplification, movement. Most of the sounds are raw sounds, like in the case of this last dancer. He was just wearing 3 speakers with a sawtooth wave that is constant, so this Doppler effect when he's moving is what creates the complexity of the music, I suppose. Recent projects, I've done a piece for a bunch of equipment and machines. I also like the idea of performer as an operator of machines and not necessarily a musician. So they really have to be very precise in the things that they do with these machines. I'm using 12 drills that I hacked. So I took the mechanism of the drill and put it in a box, so that it becomes like a kind of keyboard of drills. And using objects that most of them actually have a motor inside. So you have on one side you have the drills, and you have also vibrators, dildos, that are put into this pendulum. So they go through the pendulum, and in the pendulum, on the bottom of the pendulum, there is a pickup. So the vibration, whenever they pass in front of the pickup, you hear the vibration of the motor, no, from the electromagnetic field of each motor. Little motor, big motor, and also the sparks of these grinders were at some point a part of the piece. Is like 1 hour
It's like
piece.
Pendulum by Steve Reich.
It's a little bit.
The only piece of him like this.
Exactly. It's a little bit, although it doesn't use feedback, but
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
the
yeah,
vibration
yeah.
of the pendulum. But that's actually creating the rhythm by passing through these
How many
different
of them?
microphones. There are 8.
8. Okay.
8. I don't know if in the demo, because also there is a little trailer. There is that part that you see, but let's see. So these drills have also this ratchet connected to it, and with this condom becomes a sort of filter. It filters out the clicks of the ratchet. No, that's the idea. It's like an hour piece. It's 1 hour long.
Yes.
The pendulum is always control movement. It's not.
It's
left
funny.
To
Yeah, that's a good question. This is the trailer. So we did the trailer before making the piece, and initially they were playing like this, and at the end they are actually going by themselves. But that's another way actually of playing the pendulum, more like a controlled machine. Also another piece that I did, I also work a lot with the same idea of using motors, but creating keyboards with those. And I guess the motivation was based on the previous piece that you saw with these motors and the drills. But what is creating the sound ultimately is the motor itself. So here what I did is the opposite, is just take out all the motors from these devices, from the electrodomestics, and leaving just the raw motor there as an instrument itself. So I have like relays, some solenoids, and these stepper motors as part of the collection of instruments. It's a piece for 2 musicians, again using also lights. I don't think I have a video of that, but the video is online if you're interested. This is part of the instruments they use. And just wanted to mention that because it's part of the work I do. I teach at the conservatory in The Hague. I work with these amazing students, inventing instruments, ways of playing those instruments, using lights, using different devices. And it's funny, but sometimes that gives me ideas for my own stuff. So I have to mention it because I have to give them credit as well. Some of them create these fantastic instruments, and some of them are not playable. Of course, the keyboard with these mouse straps, of course, is not playable. But it's all a kind of a feedback loop between students and the work I do, or the work they do and my work. Well, nothing more than invite you for the concert in 15 minutes or half an hour, where I'm doing a piece with Goshka, that's a harpsichordist, based on games. So actually, she has to play games with this harpsichord. I took out the controllers of all the sensors of the control. I put it on the keyboard, and she has to play games with the keyboard of the harpsichord. I'm switching between different games, so I have two computers. So sometimes she's playing one game, and sometimes she's playing another game. Let's see if that part works.
It works on the screen.
And you see it on the screen all the time. You see it on the screen, but the switcher was giving problems today. I have to say that that's all part of it, because it's a tryout. It's not a finished piece, so we wanted to use this possibility of doing a
work in
tryout.
progress.
It's a work in progress, like call it like that. It sounds better. And the rest of the piece involves 8-bit art as well. So she's triggering some 8-bit art that I found, and sounds of Game Boy that I managed to hack and record, and she's triggering those sounds as well with some visuals. So yeah, thank you very much. If you have any questions.
Crazy imagination.
Thank you very much.
Amazing.
Great.
Thank you for being
Yeah.
here. Thank you.
The practical question: can you send me a PDF from this? Because,
Sure.
Yeah, it would be great to. Do you have active links, for example? Because usually when we publish, when we make the update of the website, most of those things are still available, which would be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have
that's
active links,
even-
but I can make it with active links.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good idea.
That's what I do all the time.
Yeah.
Giving
Hyperlinks.
the access to share those things, because then
Totally.
it has sense.
Yeah, it makes
Yeah.
sense, especially when the pieces are not complete here, so you can always refer to them.
Yeah.
They are online.
I have a question about composition. Have you done some fixed pieces or symphonies or just the works, just is wrote down
With-
already,
Yeah,
and you can repeat it, not
like you
Physically.
mean instrumental works with no.
yeah. Have you wrote any pieces already? So you have a fixed pieces. Have you? And
All of these are fixed. All of these pieces have a score, and they always have to be performed the same way.
So
I mean-
all of this is notated.
Everything is notated. Nothing is
Notate.
improvised. Nothing is. I don't work with improvisation
Oh,
very
yeah.
much.
how do you compose it? The first is your idea in the head, and then you search for the proper sound, or
No, I think it's more about the exploration of the object itself. So if I have to write a piece for phone, I will say what the possibilities are. I don't find anything the first day. The second day I start finding something I don't like. The third day maybe I find an idea, and then I find a way of performing this idea, manipulating this technique. And the last step is actually notating these things.
Yes.
That's basically the process always.
So it is not exactly that you first you have an idea of the work, of the fixed work, and you try to compose it and search a proper not like this.
it all becomes
This is
from
experimentation with the sound.
totally experimentation and exploration. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I can have like one work gives me the idea to make another work exploring something else, something related, and in many cases I end up doing something completely different that I didn't. So it's more like a motivation or inspiration to create
Yes.
with something, but the process of finding that something brings me somewhere else.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have to say that this is far beyond the extended techniques.
Mm.
I mean the classic extended techniques, because this is you're adding stuff on the instruments or you create something new. So we could say that I mean this is like a hyper extended techniques or something. We could give it another name because it's much more advanced than these scratch tones on the violoncello or these multiphonics and so on.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I tried to say at the beginning. That for the kind of work I do, I don't necessarily think on these as extended techniques, but they are probably something else, or hyper extended, if you will.
Yeah.
I have a little bit the problem of referring to traditional terms. I find it sometimes problematic, because we have one foot in tradition, and that I want to kind of pull away from that a little bit. So I try to, of course, it's important to know history and the tradition that we have with these instruments, but it's also sometimes important to try to forget about it and approach it from a fresh perspective, I feel. And sometimes it can bring us to places that we didn't imagine, instead of thinking, well, this is the sound of the instrument and how can I expand the sound. You know what I mean?
Yes. One last question. I mean, do you ever mix, like what he said before, maybe you would have a traditional instrument playing in a traditional manner together with this super extended technique? I mean, to have like a mixed media, let's say. Do you do that, or it's...
Yeah, sometimes I do that. I like to also question probably some models, and if I do that, then I will do something else on the back, kind of questioning why things are like they are, I would think. In the case of the I put a picture of a violin piece that I wrote, where the object of experimentation was the violinist, not the violin. So I asked her to play different objects with the same kind of position, so kind of question, why do we play that instrument like that, and why it becomes actually so normal for us after being part of this culture. But it's sometimes, if you see it from outside, from perspective, it's actually quite strange to play an instrument like this, I feel. I don't know. But kind of like question some of the models that are there is something that I also like to do in the kind of stuff, the kind of pieces I compose. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot. That was the last presentation on the Audio Art conference. And we have a 20 minutes break. I'm talking to you, but I'm talking also to this lens of the camera, which is aside. So I say like hello. Let's make a short coffee break, and then we join the concert, which is also webcasted live on 3 URL addresses. So the address of the studio we are now here, the address of the Audio Art Festival, Audio Art PL, but since you are physically here, present here, maybe it's not so important. And then on Facebook, on the website of the festival, on Facebook, it's going on simultaneously.
Good distribution.
Yes.
We're all over the world.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Na koncertowej sali, tak?
A koncertowy, tak jest.
Thank you.
Super.
Thank you.
With the cable.
Yeah, don't worry, eh? This cable
So
is
that's
actually from
so
downstairs.
crazy. So in fact, I fixed it just before the conference.
We have a problem with HDMI today.
Tomorrow is Monday, so I will call the technician.
Right.
And I said, well, it's over, but we need 4 classes.
Actually, it's more important. So I'm gonna run to prepare for downstairs.
I have many questions, but we can talk about
We'll
later.
talk about that.
I think that is more safe.
Hello, see you. Gdzie jest ta sala? To jest
Na dole.
ta duża taka, widziałem.
Sala koncertowa, główna sala. Jak pan zejdzie, to od razu tam foyer. Teraz jak pan chodzi, to od razu na wprost. Już tam siedzą wolontariusze i sprzedają bilety, także bardzo łatwo znaleźć miejsce. No. Ma pan wejście? Ma pan wejściówkę jakąś? A kupował pan coś, czy na razie nic? No to zaraz, gdzie ja mam plecak?
Ale to tam nie mogę podejść i kupić sobie biletu normalnie?
Można, ale jeżeli pan jest znajomym dyrektora festiwalu, to dlaczego pan nie może wziąć takiego zaproszenia i wziąć zaproszenie?
O, bardzo
To
dziękuję.
jest nawet dla 2 osób. Jak kogoś pan przyuważy, to można go ściągnąć.
Panie Marku, przesłałem panu tam na Messengera 6-minutowy z YouTube'a ściągnięte filmik o tym, jak Ewangelis pisze tam sobie, komponuje po prostu. I o tym chciałbym tam kiedyś porozmawiać, jak się umówimy, jak pan będzie miał wolne chwile.
Ten kabel muszę oddać, bo to jest ich kabel, a z kolei nasz jest tam na sali koncertowej, więc jakieś są takie dziwne dzisiaj.
No i to ja widzę, ale proszę mi jeszcze wytłumaczyć tutaj, bo te wykłady dotyczą prezentacji, na jakich instrumentach ci kompozytorzy, którzy brali tutaj udział, komponują swoją akustyczną muzykę.
No to nie.
Elektroniczną akustyczną.
Powiem tak, dużo by wyjaśniać, bo to jest tak. Studio ma 50-lecie i to jest jakby długi ciąg od tak intensywny od połowy XX wieku i Studio Muzyki Elektroakustycznej powstało jako część katedry kompozycji. Więc jesteśmy na uczelni, która ma 4 wydziały. Ma pierwszy wydział, gdzie są kompozytorzy, teoria muzyki itd.
Tak.
Natomiast ja uczę też na ASP, tam mam z kolei pracownię audiosfery a festiwal z kolei jest tak pomiędzy tym, bo Audio Art powstało pod koniec lat 60. jako część jednak rozwoju sztuk wizualnych. To międzynarodowa grupa Fluxus to po raz pierwszy wyartykułowała i oni schodzili do całkowitych archetypów jakby wszystkiego. Oni próbowali wyczyścić to pole i dlatego powstał sound art, który, ja to w wykładzie tłumaczę, który łączy te dwie tradycje, muzyczną i sztuk wizualnych w jedno. I tutaj powstają obiekty, tu przede wszystkim powstają instalacje dźwiękowe, powstają performanse muzyczne. Teraz każdy z nich zaproszony przeze mnie reprezentuje troszeczkę inne podejście. On jest kompozytorem, regularnie wykształconym kompozytorem, ale były to osoby, którzy są przede wszystkim konstruktorami zupełnie nowych projektów, na których niekoniecznie się gra. Definicja instrumentu się w ogóle całkowicie zmieniła. Z jednej strony w muzyce elektronicznej instrument rozpadł się na 2 części, my się zajmujemy tylko tą wibrującą częścią dźwiękową. Nie ma już instrumentu jako takiego, tylko bierzemy jego część dźwiękową i tym się zajmujemy.
Trywialnie mówiąc, bawimy się dźwiękami.
Ale to wielokrotnie my do tego wracamy, dlatego on na samym początku powiedział, że on akurat stwierdził, że on odchodzi od koncepcji preparacji i wszelkich poszerzonych technik, również wokalnych i tak dalej, i próbuje znaleźć jakby nowy paradygmat dla źródeł dźwięku, czyli on adaptuje pewne rzeczy, ale i tutaj dobrze, że pan zapytał, tak, bo takie było wrażenie, jakby oni improwizowali. Nie, akurat on jest dalej kompozytorem i on je wkłada. Dokładnie taką samą postawę reprezentuje Wojtek Błażejczyk, a nie wiem, czy pan był na jego koncercie Muzyka. No więc właśnie, tam
widziałem w tym, ale...
I było tak samo na wykładzie. Znaczy on jest świetny kompozytor, pisze na orkiestrze i tak dalej, ale stworzył kategorię obiektofonów. Czyli też nie jest jakby oryginalny w tym, bo to Intonarum Mori, Luis Russolo z początku XX wieku już to robili. Ale on stworzył, czyli przedmioty powszechnego użytku, sprawdza ich możliwości dźwiękowe, dokładnie sprawdza wysokość i je wstawia w swój zespół. I teraz mamy tradycyjne instrumenty i obiektofony i oni razem grają. Czyli takie jest
to nie jest połączenie muzyki konwencjonalnej z muzyką konkretną?
Nie, bo muzyka konkretna to jest znowu nieporozumienie. Pierwszy Ferrer po prostu odkrył, ale nie, no on odkrył przede wszystkim, że dźwięki otoczenia należy zrównać z dźwiękami komponowanymi. Dlatego nazwał ją konkretną, bo twierdził, że cała muzyka przed muzyką konkretną jest abstrakcyjna, bo jest tworzona abstrakcyjnie, a my mamy dźwięki wokół siebie, ale nie traktujemy jako muzyki. Więc on rejestrując je na płytach decelitowych, zacinając rowki, zapętlając je, bo dźwięki albo mają długi ciąg, albo w większości są krótkie.
W ten sposób
jak je zapętli, no to one trwają cały czas.
Tak,
No
to jest muzyka konkretna.
To jest muzyka konkretna. był antagonizm między nim a Stockhausenem, między tymi dwoma studiami w Paryżu, Groupe de Recherche Musicale, a właśnie studia elektronicznej muzyki w Kolonii, bo Stockhausen z kolei nam jeszcze z Wernerem Eplerem i z Herwendem Eimertem, oni stworzyli podwaliny pod muzykę, która jest całkowicie sztuczna, atonalna, odchodząca od wszelkiej tradycji, więc na sinusach oparta tylko na dźwiękach elektronicznych, generowanych elektronicznie. Przez wiele lat był antagonizm między tymi dwoma szkołami, no ale Stockhausen napisał Gesang der Junglinge, gdzie głos dziecka wchodzi i jest jednak konkretnym głosem.
Tak.
On tak się jakby zrobił takie no nie tyle porozumienie, bo on zresztą sam studia Eins to jest też muzyka konkretna, więc on był i tu, ale były przez jakiś czas te ośrodki antagonistyczne w historii muzyki. Amerykanie wprowadzili termin music for tape, czyli nie zainteresowało, skąd pochodzi źródło. To, co jest nagrane na taśmie, to jest to tworzywo, prawda? Czyli tam tak powstaje
baroka. No
nie, tego jest bardzo dużo. Ja prowadzę zajęcia z historii muzyki elektroakustycznej, więc ja tam zaczynam od takiego elektrycznego klawesynu z XVIII wieku, gdzie na zasadzie butelek lejdejskich wyładowania uderzają w dzwonki, to jest taki rodzaj karionu. Tak zostało to Dalabord, francuski mnich, tak, coś takiego wymyślił.
Panie Marku, ale takie zasadnicze pytanie, ponieważ ja jestem melomanem, a nie muzykiem. W związku z tym ja bazuję na tym, co jest popularne, tworzone przez znanych...
Że za 10:06.
Aha, no to idziemy. Dobra. To sobie pogadamy kiedy indziej.
Ja zawsze muszę coś sprawdzić przed koncertem.
Okej.
Potem zaczyna być, albo nagle wpadamy w popół, bo ktoś zapomniał, wie pan. I ja to nagle widzę.
Dobra, idę.
Zaraz tam zejdę, dobrze?